Hello, my friends. Welcome to my corner. The Nobel Prize in Literature in 1998 was awarded to the Portuguese writer José Saramago, who, with parables sustained by imagination, compassion, and irony, continually enables us once again to apprehend an illusory reality. José Saramago was one of those enviable authors because he wrote literary fiction, but he was also a bestseller. So I'd like to compare him in that context with Gabriel Garcia Marquez or with Mario Vargas Llosa, and there are many more examples of authors who manage to do that. I think a large part of his success lies in the fact that he can be read and enjoyed by the so-called general public, and he can also be studied and analyzed by literary critics and by academics. In other words, I think his works are great at both the surface level, if you will, and also more in depth. My experience with Saramago began when I was in college. He was part of my Nobel Prize reading project that I have told you about so many times before. And I started at a very strange place. My first experience of Saramago's work was his novel, The Double. It was the perfect place for me to start because I absolutely love, and you could even say that I am obsessed with the theme of the doppelganger. Those kind of stories, I just absolutely love them. So after that came Blindness and the Gospel According to Jesus Christ, and also a very tiny book that is a short story, really, titled The Tale of the Unknown Island. I really liked and really enjoyed all of these books very much, but for some reason I never read Saramago again until now. And I always told myself the next time that I experience something by Saramago, I'm gonna go for Todos os Nomes, or All the Names. This is the one that I have read right now, and I want to share my experience of this book with you. So All the Names is not a complicated novel at all. It is very approachable. It is the story of a man, Senor Jose, who is a clerk at a government agency known as the Central Registry for Births, Marriages, and Deaths. He is the only named character in the novel. So we have a situation very similar to that of Blindness, where the characters also are not referred to by their names, but maybe by their professions or by some distinguishing characteristic that they happen to have. So Senor Jose is in his 50s. He is a man who lives alone in a very small house that happens to be attached to his workplace. And he basically has no life. I think that is the best way that we can describe him. He entertains himself by collecting the files or the cards of famous people. And one day he realizes that he has by mistake grabbed an additional file that belongs to a woman who is 36 years old. This is a completely unknown woman to him, of course, and he decides to go and look for her. This is where the story actually begins, and this is what this novel, All the Names, is about. This search for this woman that is referred to in the file. So the most evident theme that I find here in this novel is the theme of solitude, because our protagonist is just a very lonely man. He may not even be a man at all. He's more like a working machine. He is the product of a heartless, bureaucratic system. And I think his desire to search for the unknown woman is a signal. It's a kind of a attempt to break from the dullness of his life. Because of the mode of the novel is satire, what we have at the center is clearly an absurd character. He is clearly a ridiculous character. You could even say he is a loser, but one that we care about and that we find ourselves rooting for. Why is that? Well, I think it's because we have all experienced at least some degree of the solitude and of the alienation that Senor Jose experiences in this story, because unfortunately it has become, I think, an integral part of modern or postmodern ways of life. Now, how do we deal with this solitude? How do we deal with this type of alienation? In the case of Senor Jose, he decides to go in search for this unknown woman. So what All the Names is saying is that we have that need, each one of us, to give a purpose to his or her life. This is a very old theme, but it's also very relatable. Senor Jose's life is just pointless. Okay, his job does not really provide fulfillment because he doesn't even know really what it is that he is doing. He needs more than that. And he also seems to have no connections with other human beings, which is something that might help in his situation of not finding meaning in his work. So the quest that he embarks upon is really the reason for his life. It's his reason for being, and also is something that keeps him occupied, which is crucial in a case like the one that he finds himself in. This is a universal theme. So even though All the Names is a very, very simple story, it is going to appeal to many readers, because also the theme of solitude, unfortunately, is a very relatable one in our modern times. I would say that Saramago's style is delightful. That's how I have always experienced it, from the first novel that I read by him, The Double, to this one, All the Names. His sentences come in all shapes and sizes, but for the most part, I would say that he likes to write in long sentences that are also involving. So you may realize all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I have read 10 pages or 20 pages or 30 pages and I didn't even realize it. And it's not only because of the sentence length, but there's another feature that is really interesting about the way that he tells stories, and that is that he incorporates his dialogue into the paragraphs. Okay, so that is something that you don't find many times in narrators. Most of the time it is clearly indicated what is dialogue and what is description. And here's the interesting thing in the context of Saramago. For punctuation marks, he uses only commas and periods, even to separate between the different speakers in the dialogue. And you may think, wow, isn't that weird? It looks a little bit weird at first, because you open one of his books and you realize that there's a block of text, but that doesn't mean that there's no dialogue. It's just that it is incorporated. And the fact that you're not going to find many periods, you're not going to find any semicolons or any dashes or anything like that, any quotation marks. It just means that everything flows a lot better. So it might seem a little bit strange at first, but it is never confusing. I have never had any problems reading Saramago. You can tell who the speaker is because he does it so well. So that is part of the artistry of this author. His stories just read wonderfully, even though they may have unconventional punctuation, or according to some readers, no punctuation at all. I don't think that's the case, but let's call it unconventional punctuation. Now, one central feature of Saramago's work is the narrator. The narrator, in the case of Saramago, is almost like an additional character. And if you're familiar with his novels, even if you have read one book by Saramago, somebody might give you a page of his work and you're going to be able to tell this is José Saramago. Not only because the dialogue is incorporated into the paragraphs, but because of the narrator's voice. Okay? This is a voice that is ironic, but it is also gentle, even understanding of the people who are involved in the story that is being told. And I think it conveys a kind of a nonchalant type of wisdom. That's how I would describe it. So another feature of this, it's not only all of these characteristics, all of these qualities of the voice of the narrator, but I am also struck by how consistent this voice is throughout the work of Saramago. I am sure that you could trace some kind of development in the voice, but for the most part, it is consistent, and so it is unmistakable. That's why I'm telling you, if they give you a page, you can tell this is Saramago. So I would say the narrator in Saramago's work is an omniscient narrator, but also a humble one. And I think that's a good combination to have. You have the power of omniscience, and at the same time, you have that humility in the voice of the narrator. So I made many connections while I was reading this book with other authors and other texts. And believe it or not, the first connection that I made was not with a book, but with a movie. I thought of the movie Brazil, okay, by Terry Gilliam. It's a classic. It's often compared to Blade Runner because it conveys that psychology of the future. And I think it's also, this idea of a character trying to break free from the dullness of bureaucratic kind of society that made me think of Brazil. But of course, Brazil was heavily influenced by George Orwell's 1984. So that's another connection that you can make. There you also have a clerk, somebody who is dedicated to his work and who basically is a cog in the machine and decides to take action in order to get away from that awful situation and that dullness that he finds himself in. Due to the sense of alienation and this dehumanization that is present in the novel, I also thought, of course, of the works of Franz Kafka. There are many connections there with many of Kafka's stories and, of course, with his novels also. And I thought, too, of an Argentine writer. His name is Guillermo Sacomano. he wrote a novel titled The Clerk. And this novel has not really received a lot of attention in the English-speaking world, even though it was translated into English in the year 2020, so relatively recently. It is also about an office worker, and this time it happens in a dystopian type of setting. So you have elements of a weird kind of romance, though I hesitate to call it that, and also some few elements or tiny elements of light sci-fi. So it's a very interesting combination, and it really made me think all the names of this novel, The Clerk, that I absolutely recommend to you. Finally, recently I talked about Thomas Pynchon's V, which is the story of a man who is on a quest. He is trying to find a, well, maybe a woman, maybe not. It depends on how you look at it. But that sense of quest also made me think of V, probably because I had just read it. So it's very easy to make connections like that. But once again, we have this idea of the quest as a way to give purpose to one's life and to get out of that dullness that characterizes modern or postmodern ways of life. So my impressions here, I really liked all the names, but I'm going to say that I enjoyed the other books that I have read by Saramago much more. Okay, this novel is quieter. It's less inventive than, say, Blindness or The Stone Raft, which have really interesting premises that grab your attention from the moment that you read the back cover, if you decide to do that. And I also, one thing that I think really influenced my reading of all the names is the fact that I enjoyed The Double, my first experience of Saramago, so much. It was just one of those amazing reads, and it's also the story of a man who is in search of another person, but in this case he is in search of himself, because what we have here is a doppelganger stories. So maybe I am biased because I really like those kinds of stories, but I felt that having read all the names after The Double, I was like, wow, I think that The Double kind of covers this idea of the search, and it does it to me in a more interesting way. But at the end of the day, all the names is just very good. It is a novel that has great depth to it, but there is really no wow factor. Now, that is perfectly okay. You don't really need a wow factor in order for a book to be good. As a matter of fact, many of my favorite books, the best novels that I have read, don't have really a wow factor. And in the context of all the names, actually that is part of the point. The fact that the life of this character is so dull and so boring. If you had a wow factor, it would be, kind of counterproductive. So even though you don't have that wow factor, it's not necessary, but still, I feel that I enjoyed the other novels that I read by Saramago quite a little bit more than I did this one. So let me give you the bottom line here. I do recommend all the names, I would say, to all readers, but especially to those who are already familiar with Saramago. If you have read maybe one novel or two by him, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. This novel really includes all of the things, all of the features that make José Saramago a great author and a captivating narrator. But if you're new to Saramago, I would say try to read maybe Blindness first, and then you can come back to all the names and to his other books. I'm going to continue to read Saramago. I have my eye on many of his books, but especially The Stone Raft, Baltasar and Blimunda, and The Year of the Death of Ricardo Reis. So those are probably, it's going to be one of those that's going to be the next one for me. But I do plan to explore his work more in depth, and I really have no idea how it was that such a long time passed before I decided to come back to him after having enjoyed his work so much. Do you have any questions, comments, recommendations, recipes? Just let me know. I'm always here, always happy to read your comments and to respond to them. Those were my 2 cents on All the Names by José Saramago. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.